Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are live in Tucumcari, New Mexico. I'm Felicia DePaula, Program Specialist with the Economic Development Department. You've tuned into our Rural Efficient Business Program interview series. New Mexico State University and the New Mexico Manufacturing Extension Program are partners of this monthly series that strives to connect and assist rural businesses and agricultural producers to New Mexico resources that reduce energy consumption, increase profits, and explore ways to implement renewable energy systems. And I'm joined here with my coworker.
Hi, good morning. I'm John Winscott with New Mexico's Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. I'm the Economic Diversification Coordinator, and thank you.
So we are here with Robert Hockaday, President of Tucumcari Bio-Energy Company. Thank you for inviting us out, Robert. We will be getting a brief tour because of Wi-Fi issues. We're going to only show a small portion of the facility, unfortunately, because it is really neat. We had the opportunity to check it out before the interview, and we'll post some of those videos to Twitter afterwards. So you're going to share a little bit of how you've been able to address the critical water shortage in your local agriculture, capture potent greenhouse gases, help restore depleted farmland, solve a local grain shortage problem, provide renewable energy benefits, and produce carbon negative natural gas and hydrogen. And that's it.
Oh, yeah.
So we will just go ahead and jump into questions in simplest terms, because I know it's really a lot to understand. What exactly does Tucumcari Bio-Energy do?
So Tucumcari Bio-Energy is going to take cattle manure and convert it to fertilizer, extract the methane that would have been emitted if it just sat around, and then produce carbon dioxide. So natural gas, carbon dioxide, and then a cultured, or essentially high-performance organic fertilizer. And essentially we are a sewer system for agriculture, and eventually we're going to go after the cities.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay. So we were reading a little bit about your history on the website. So I know that you have a history with Los Alamos National Laboratory. How did that help mold this vision?
The critical vision, as I said, I worked on nuclear weapons and things like that. But I said, the critical problems are in water and energy. I said, if we can solve those, we'll solve most of the political problems. If you realize why countries go to war, it's usually because they need something, or there's a critical problem. They're not going to survive if they don't get it. So they go to war with their neighbor, things like that. And you say, it's just about water and energy. And if we can solve those, we can solve an awful lot of the problems. And this particular project started with a shortage of water. We were running out of water in the eastern side of New Mexico. Projections are less than 5 years in some places. Some areas are they're emptying out simply because there's not enough groundwater to support agriculture and the towns.
That always terrifies me when I hear the reality of it. It freaks me out.
Sure. And how did you find this location? It's kind of a unique thing. You can't really go on Zillow and look up ethanol.
Yeah. This is interesting. I knew about this plant 20 years ago. I knew the banker who was holding the loan on the plant, and the frustration that ethanol plant was running, and then we ran into a drought, and there was no way they could resell this plant or make it do something. And I had suggested, well, why don't we just take that old ethanol plant, you guys have it, I was visiting the town, and turn it into something to get rid of the cattle manure and get carbon dioxide so we can do water efficient agriculture, like greenhouses and aquaculture. The idea is if you have carbon dioxide, you can go contained. You don't have to breathe. You don't have to blow air through the system just to get carbon dioxide. And that's why greenhouses are generally far more efficient with their water usage, because they don't need to blow air through just to capture carbon dioxide. You supply it as gas. And that was where we started. So just solve the water shortage problem by capturing carbon dioxide.
Is Tucumcari the only location with something similar to this in the state?
Tucumcari, this was a prototype. It was built in the 1980s. It was a small little plant. It's one of the smallest ethanol plants in the United States. And it's the prototype for the plant that's in Portales. The Portales is just a 3 times larger facility. And so it was built as a small prototype. And its problem is it's not as efficient as the bigger operations. And so simultaneously you go into a drought, you have to import the fuel, the feed, and you got a problem. And so this was a was sort of an abandoned little plant that couldn't go anywhere. It just couldn't make the economics of the bigger plants. So it was just sitting there.
Sure. Could you go into detail about what the supply chain might look like for this facility once it's up and running? Like, where would you get the manure product? How would, once you go through the process of turning it into fertilizer, then where does it go, that type of thing?
Yeah. Well, locally, we are in the sort of feedlot and dairy industry because our climate is very nice for cattle. The ground is dry most of the time, which is good for the cattle. And so the idea is we've got in the area about 150,000 head of cattle in roughly a 90-mile radius from here. Now, we are not right in the middle of the feedlot industry and dairy industry, but their problem is they have too much manure. And we want to move it to our location because we have water. We can grow crops for them and deliver it back as hay or feed or grains to those dairies and feedlots. But since the epicenter of the feedlot and dairy industry is sort of south of us and in the east in Texas. And the logic is if we can prove it works here, take your cattle manure, process it, and return it as high-grade organic fertilizer, or actually do the crop growing here and ship it back, we can start what we call a little mercantile system. We build something for you, and they build something for us, and we're happy together.
Sure.
But the idea is part of this is also trying to bring up agricultural rural areas. We are in a serious problem. There's a big difference in economic income between those two areas of the country. And you say, well, what can rural areas do? Well, traditionally we do agriculture. So the logic is how do we do higher value crops and end up lifting up agriculture simultaneously? Well, we can make energy. We've got gobs of wind capacity here, solar capacity. We can make the fuel that will fuel the vehicles and the trucks and the tractors and do it by removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. And the deeper detail is that agriculture created a lot of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere from plowing the soil. We can return it to the soil.
And not to jump around, you mentioned solar and wind. I know I would recommend any of our viewers to go to Tucumcari Bio-Energy's website. It's fascinating. You've got videos, sort of testimonials. You have diagrams kind of mapping out your whole strategy. But I do know that you mentioned that you're interested in putting sort of wind and solar as like a major component of this facility eventually. And I think you mentioned black tip solar panels.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you could give our audience a little bit of a background on what makes those special.
So we originally, when I came to this town, we were going to put in a photovoltaic solar panel operation. But the price of solar kept dropping. The panels were being made in China. The price kept going lower and lower. There was no way you were going to put in a new innovation that would require having to get up to that same scale. So I said, what can I do? There's things that solar panels suffer from. They get hot. Their performance drops as they get hotter. So I said, okay, why don't we cool the solar panels, make them tougher, make them so they withstand high winds. They can handle hurricanes now by toughening them up. And we said, well, another little problem we have, particularly in rural areas, we've got lots of tires lying around. I said, why don't it's dead weight. And they last for 40 years and they're pretty easy to move around. So why don't I put solar panels on rubber tires? And said, just mount the two together because the tire is free. In fact, you get paid to use it. And I'm replacing concrete or steel drills or piles that go in the ground. So I get paid to use this material that's lying around, and it particularly piles up in rural areas. Where the trucks stop and leave their tires is in rural areas. So the funny detail is it's a natural resource in rural areas. So use those big truck tires as dead weight. And it turns out it's pretty convenient. Another trick it does, it actually covers the ground. In the southwestern United States, if you cover the ground and let water percolate down underneath, you essentially displace it, go down to the edges, you'll have green, plants will grow on the edges of this. You'll have a reservoir underwater. We call this the highway effect. If you guys drive along the highway, look and see where the wildflowers grow. They grow within a few feet of the edge of the highway because the water is increased. The precipitation drains over the edges. And so when we're in a drought, the side of the highway is the greenest thing around. Now the rabbits and the deer figure this out too. And that's why they're always grazing in the middle of the night. You're like, oh, come on. Why do I have cows and rabbits and all this animal life right next to the highway? But it's pretty dramatic to watch in the Southwest United States. It's the greenest part of the landscape is the edge of the highway. Well, we can artificially do that. You can have a strip of solar panels. You concentrate the water on the side. You can teach your cows not to mess with them. And but the idea is now you can increase the growing capacity of that field. Mm-hmm. You simply lack lots of rain, but we have some rain. Mm-hmm. And so now you can have little sanctuaries, and it's effectively underneath every one of these solar panels to the side. And it's cheap, and you use what you've got. In this case, rubber tires. And I want to get rid of that concrete because it turns out 25% of the carbon impact of a solar panel is the block of concrete used to hold it down. Mm-hmm. And you're going, wait a minute, that's not quite as green. We're using concrete to put in solar panels. Right. And you say, yeah, it's kind of an overlooked little detail. Mm-hmm. And you go, yeah, it's just a bunch of dirt and rocks and cement. But we got dirt cheap rubber tires. In fact, we get paid for them.
Well, now that you're on the topic of, finance, how did you go about trying to find partners and stakeholders that are helping you make this effort happen?
Okay, now I'll tell you the hard stuff. Yeah. But it's really easy to think up ideas and solutions, but the hard thing is to convince everybody else, particularly a banker. I'll start picking on bankers. They're very conservative. They don't want to try things that are new. They want to make sure they make it the next quarter. They don't get fired for making some lousy loan to some farmer who's got some goofy idea. So the idea is that we have to present this as a project and we're trying bank financing to start with. Said, it's not venture capital. This is heavy equipment, large scale. That's not the venture capital's thing. They're more into high tech. We say they're interested in shiny things. And this is dirty. I mean, we're talking cattle manure and moving, we're talking not quite 1 million tons a year of movement of material, but it's large. Mm-hmm. And agriculture generally moves a lot of material. Mm-hmm. So he said, okay, it's a little different. Well, interesting things have happened. We've got a greenhouse warming problem, and it's ratcheting up the need for this project. We've got Elon Musk sent out a request for the Carbon X Prize, the largest prize in history, and we fit that. So we applied, but the idea was to get publicity. Say, look, we can solve the problem. And there's a whole bunch of other companies trying to do something like this. Say, can we take greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere and make it a viable, and in this case, a profitable business? We've shown on our feasibility studies, our profit margins over 50%. You go, this is like a cigarette business. I mean, profit margins are that high, but it's unbelievable. Yeah. You walk in and say, I'm going to do this with manure, and we're going to make double your money in a year. Mm-hmm. And you're like, what's going on? Well, it turns out there's a demand out there, a demand to reduce greenhouse gases, and they're paying very high premium prices for fuel that's been captured from waste material like cattle manure, because you're taking it out of the atmosphere. And you say, put the pieces together. Mm-hmm. This is a business that can now reduce a major problem, make it so that, and do it at good economical price. Mm-hmm. It's not going to cost hundreds of dollars to capture greenhouse gases. We're talking below $50. In fact, we're probably going to go below $30 a ton for carbon dioxide. And that makes it quite economical. And now you're in a profitable business. And you say, well, there goes the neighborhood. As soon as someone figures out you can make a lot of money, then great, we want everybody to do it.
Sure.
The market there for reducing greenhouse gases, it's estimated we need about 1 million digesters in the world throughout to take care of sewage problems, garbage problems, in general, that all that organic material that's no longer useful for other things can be processed. Mm-hmm. And you can take it out and you can clean it up so you don't have a pollution problem. Most of these are pollution problems right now. Cattle manure piled up, sitting on the ground, just leaks into the ground. It creates nice nitrates, but it's in the wrong place. It's just, you need to put it out with the corn or the plants. So move it.
Yep.
Anyway, it's like putting these pieces together. And what's interesting is it's a big problem. And it's not enough to come in and say, well, I got a new way to make this paint dry or some one little thing.
Mhm.
No, it's complex. You got to
Mhm.
pull these pieces together. It involves all these skills. You're going to be engaging the farmers to do this. You're going to engage the dairies, the food processors, the transportation systems. I should say my biggest problem is getting the attention of FedEx, UPS, and Amazon.
Hmm.
They say they want to be green. I'm going to challenge them. Come on, guys.
Sure.
You're driving back and forth here, and I want to supply fuel.
There you go.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you had a feasibility study done for this. It was through Arrowhead Center at NMSU. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
How did you engage them?
Okay, an interesting problem. If you're going to get a USDA grant,
Yeah.
which there's a bunch popping up,
Mhm.
you need to have a feasibility study. They
Mhm.
don't look at it seriously if you don't have an independent feasibility
Can
study.
you repeat that so that everyone
Okay,
hears
if you're
it?
trying to go out,
Yeah.
go out,
Right.
get a grant, the USDA grant, anything of substantial size,
Mhm.
you need a feasibility study, independent feasibility study.
Mhm.
I'm an engineer. I like to do everything myself. But
Yeah.
Sure.
I go and say, okay, who's going to do an independent feasibility study? They cost about $50,000.
Sure.
And okay, great. How do I find this? Well, Arrowhead Center said, we help university-related technologies come out, but we're also willing to take on old alumni or anyone with a good idea. They're open.
Sure.
And I'm an old intimate Aggie,
All right, me too.
and said, but it's not a requirement, but it's nice, friendly thing.
Yeah.
But to take a technology, and I've been at this for quite a long time,
Mhm.
so I'm kind of like in the old category. And so the whole idea is they do a feasibility study, and it turns out Dale Spencer essentially got his PhD by doing this. So it benefits them in a sense, but he was pushing very hard for it. Says this makes a lot of sense, makes money. So I got good grades on effectively a good study,
Yeah.
saying it made sense,
Sure.
and push it as fast as you can because it's vital.
How long was that process from engaging Arrowhead Center to getting the finalized feasibility study so you can go out and try to find a grant
Yeah.
for this project?
It took us about a year
Okay.
to do the feasibility study, and it was done in 2016. So that was like 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got feasibility study
Sure.
in hand. I'm marching to the financial institutions. I'm different institute. I mean, we had a bank that essentially dropped us because we went into COVID-19.
Yeah.
They were having to cover all these PPA loans and trying to worry about some digester, and they've got requirements to satisfy community requirements. So they're stuck,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to just drop it. But it's frustrating. You walk in and say, this is a neat idea. I need collateral to do this for a bank.
Sure.
And so I'm trying to go to other organizations to get collateral.
Sure.
We tried to satisfy new market tax credit. They would be able to put up the
Mhm.
collateral. They have since sort of ceased their operations. COVID-19 hit them pretty hard too. But there's something called opportunity zones.
Mhm.
Can you create a business and put yourself in an opportunity zone? Well, it turns we're trying to work with the university here,
Mhm.
Mesalands Community College,
Sure.
and said they're in the opportunity zone. It just so happened the way the opportunity zones were created, we're outside of it, but we need an office. And they said, if you locate your headquarters in the opportunity zone, we want to recruit students because we're going to need students and people who understand what we're doing. I need some vigorous people to get in here because this is mechanical. We've got to move a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
And it's got some neat things to it. It's huge biological cultures. And the possibilities, if we know how to do it here, we'll reproduce. Very biological.
Sure. And I didn't know you were working with Mesalands. I know that they have a very robust wind program.
Yeah.
And do you see any overlap there?
Oh,
Yeah.
So the critical overlap here is we've got wind. They'd like to do more solar.
Uh-huh.
And the problem is those things produce power when it's windy
Sure.
or sunny. And we need 24-hour power. So the
Mhm.
idea is that if we can produce a fuel, particularly you start with methane, I can also produce hydrogen
Mhm.
from this methane.
Mhm.
The greenest hydrogen you can possibly make.
Sure.
Extremely negative on carbon impact. So the idea is now we can store it and wait. And I design fuel cells.
Oh.
Little detail. I designed fuel cells. I've designed electrolysis cells. I've got about at least 30 patents on all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So the logic is they fit together. You say, I can store the energy, deliver it as needed. It turns out a power operation like this can have its own solar farm, consume all its power, keep the power company happy because I'm not interfering on the grid, but I'm essentially delivering a useful output. I could be their power stabilizer.
Sure.
Or they just buy the fuel from me, put it into their power plant, and great, you get green credit. You blend in our fuel, 20% our stuff, 80% their stuff. We're carbon neutral on natural gas. So when people are worried about, should we stop using natural gas, please don't stop yet, because that's the infrastructure we have for storing energy. Natural gas represents the ability to hold energy, and we can make it carbon neutral.
Sure. And you mentioned hydrogen, and you have your own patents for this. So I assume you're not replicating some of these ideas for hydrogen capture from other places in the United States. This is kind of sort of breaking new ground in many different fronts.
Yes.
With this project.
We want to demonstrate it here.
Yes.
I want to put my own filling station in. We're talking to Biotech. Wow. Come on, guys, listen to me. Anyway, we want to put our own filling station in. There's a thing called the hydrogen hub, and from the infrastructure bill coming along. And you say, well, we're on I-40. We want to fuel, and it's mainly big trucks, because you're not the last thing you electrify for transportation. If you were thinking batteries, is trucks. Trucks need a lot of energy. They want to refuel quickly. They're trying to move things as quickly as possible.
Sure.
So hydrogen looks the logical next step, but we'll start with compressed natural gas.
Yeah.
We can do it. We can retrofit trucks, and then you can create new fancy trucks, and I'll help with all the designs. I'll keep feeding this stuff in, but you might say, I'm a guy, it's just way too early. I'm kind of like a guy back from the future. I'm here.
Doc Brown.
It's going to be a breakthrough. Invest in Yahoo. Come on.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing that we haven't already talked about is the hydroponics and aquaponics that you're thinking about doing here. For people that are unfamiliar with those two terms, can you kind of go into the science and what your plans for it here?
Yeah. So hydroponics essentially is trying to grow plants without soil. So usually you provide the plant with oxygenated water.
Sure.
Because if you just put a plant, normal, regular plant that grows in soil, and drop him in water, he doesn't have enough oxygen around his roots. And when they breathe, they need a little oxygen.
Yeah.
And it just kills the plant. So you have to oxygenate the water, and that's hydroponics. So you have these plants, and you aerate the water circulating through the system. And so you see a hydroponics thing, you pick a plant up, and it's got a big bundle of roots. Well, it's bundled, but it's running through this nice oxygenated water. Now, the idea is you combine that with fish. And animal life that lives in water. So the idea is that water can then be moving or recirculated from the plant, the animal life. And the idea is they can feed on each other. I mean, the fish and crustaceans can produce their effluent that can be used with the plants. And then the plants grow, and you can feed some of your leftovers to the fish in the ideal situation. Oftentimes it's a little difficult to loop everything, but the idea is if they're close to each other, they tend to be synergistic. That immense amount of water keeps the greenhouse cool too, stable. Greenhouses in general, they tend to overheat in the daytime. And so the idea is greenhouse operations, aquaponics, the bottom line is they use less water when they operate. And people go, whoa, there's all this water in here. Isn't that expensive? Well, you make the big investment, the water's there, but your evaporation rate, you're not really interacting so much with the atmosphere. You're adding your carbon dioxide or your oxygen directly to the liquid. And so it's more or less like a sealed agriculture. I mean, we're in the high altitude region of the country. We evaporate water at rapid rates. So one of the ways to sort of solve our water problem is reduce the evaporation rate. One of them is to put a big cover over the whole thing.
Sure. And
I can tell you a whole bunch of things about what you can do with that and how to keep your greenhouse cool in the summertime and keep it warm in the winter.
I think I just realized why my lemon trees died. I'm like, oh, it got too hot. I threw them out this morning. I was like, well, that sucks. Now it's like, wow, I didn't realize it could get too hot.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah, the frustration is you'd like that greenhouse to keep a stable temperature. That's kind of why you built it. And so it sort of moves it to a more tropical climate.
Yeah, sure.
You can grow banana trees in the middle of
I don't know why I thought I could
temperate.
grow lemon trees and dead dry in my sunroom without any
Yeah.
water in there. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Wow.
Don't ask me. I can't keep anything alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you have like short-term plans revolving around the fertilizer and things like that, and then long-term plans with the other renewable energy factors here. But could you kind of go over the timeline of this project? Like how long
Yeah.
do you think it would take to reach short-term plans, long-term plans, things like that?
Yeah. Well, we've set up to take. This is a refurbishment of an old plant. The idea is to refurb a lot of the equipment. There's a few pieces of equipment that need to be put in new. It's estimated 1 year from the time you say go. I have money in the bank,
Yeah.
not just a promise, but real money in the bank. I
Yep.
can then refurbish it in 1 year. Then it takes me 6 months to essentially shake it down, go to full production. That's the timeline. It's more or less a banker's schedule.
Sure.
Perfect.
Bankers like 1 year, no fiddling around. So we have to make the engineering fit what the bankers like. I'm an engineer, so
Yeah.
I have to work this problem of how do you get everything to move into place fast enough to get it working.
So I had a quick question. I know that Tim Hageman is
Yeah.
who referred you as a good interview. So what work have you done with EDD or USDA? Just anything that other businesses who are watching might be able to utilize as well.
Okay, I can tell you the history, what we've tried.
Sure, perfect.
So we got a grant, a LEDA grant
Mm-hmm.
was how we bought this plant. The town said, why don't we use the remaining funds we have in a LEDA fund? And we purchased the plant. Said, okay, now Bob, now you have to put your money where your mouth is. I've got it now, and now let's see how we can rework this system. And so we've got the proposal done, and now we've worked with essentially the New Mexico Small Business Assistance Program from Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Awesome.
And so we've had at least 3 grants from them. It's their personnel doing it, but we've modeled the mixing. So you say, okay, these are fermentation tanks. Will they behave themselves if we put cattle manure in there? And the answer is yes. There are certain limits, but we have to be careful what we can do and how we do it. We can do this. We've done, those were studies. We also did verification of what we were doing. So we needed some kind of independent verification that we actually have been studying the digestion process and checking whether Joe's manure over here or Sam's over there have any problems with our process. And we checked dry manure and dairy cow manure, free range cattle, and all this kind of stuff. And we think we've got the problem solved. There's been a variety of projects in the country that failed spectacularly.
Oh, really?
So you go, okay, we're not going to fall into those pitfalls. So we've done that. We have made applications to the USDA. Let you know from the infrastructure project, we've got a monster grant coming along. They had $1 billion to spend on trying to restore soil and called climate smart commodities. So we applied for that.
Okay.
The applications are all in, so I can talk to you.
Awesome.
So everybody else listening who may be in the
Yeah,
same program,
Mhm.
we've applied. And it involves a lot of other organizations in the community, including the Ute Mountain Tribe in the Four Corners area. They have the same infrastructure. They've got farming, irrigated farming. They've got cattle. They've got a carbon dioxide pipeline that we also have one. So interesting details of our communities. We're working with a fertilizer manufacturer in Alamogordo to make organic fertilizer that's pelletized to fit, and so that people can buy it online or you can buy it by the truckload. But the idea is it's stable. Regular cattle manure is not entirely stable. It's processed. But most folks want something they can put in their barn or put on their shelf and use it as needed. So the idea is, how do you make fertilizer, in particular, stuff that's derived from organic material, convenient and usable, and you can just follow the instructions and use it. So the idea is how to make essentially soil amendments. And I say 90% of the story here is fertilizer. If we change the way fertilizer is delivered and deliver organic fertilizer, we're going to help solve a problem of a shortage of fertilizer that's happening right now because of the invasion of Ukraine. And we've been addicted to mineral fertilizers for a long time. And it turns out it's hurting our agricultural productivity. And so if I can deliver organic fertilizers that actually restore the organic culture in the ground, we can actually start pushing the organic carbon back into the soil. And that's something that's been realized. It's been known for quite a while. But now we have to deliver it to large-scale commodity farming. So you're no longer just going to buy little sacks of fertilizer. An ammonia truck drives up and squirts it in. We have to deliver something that's bulkier, but we want to deliver it so it's precise and delivers results. So we've got a grant right now with Sandia National Laboratory to do a field test. So we're comparing different plants, different fertilizers, the organic ones versus the mineral fertilizers, and an unusual one that just popped up. Happens to be something that's made in New Mexico. Sure. So we're trying to field test. We're comparing them. We're measuring all the parameters, how much organic carbon is being taken or bound in the soil or released, how much nitrous oxide is coming out. We're trying to measure water retention. Turns out if you have healthy soil, you retain more water. Meaning it'll ride through the might say drought periods better. But fundamentally, it's really clever. The soil is very complex. It's got ancient cultures in it. We want to stimulate those. We want to treat them well. And hopefully then they'll treat us well too.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the insect life. People are always trying to kill it off. And like, actually, they're pretty beneficial sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need those.
Yeah, we need them. The whole biosphere is important here.
Well, I think we're winding down a little bit. Would you like to show us?
Sure.
Give us
Yes, I
a
would.
3-minute high-level tour of where Wi-Fi will allow.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to follow him in with your computer and I'll stick here for
Okay.
closing?
Sure.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll
Okay.
see how well the hotspot does.
All right. I will
Keep me in the
follow
center
up.
frame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be your cameraman.
Yeah, you're-
Okay, I'm flipping over our vegetation.
All right.
Okay, you're about to enter what we call the cathedral. It's about a 40 to 50 foot high tall ceiling. You come a little closer.
Sure.
I'm pretty bleached there.
Yeah. Okay.
But right here are these are fermentation tanks. We've got 6 of them, essentially in 2 rows. And down below are these are heat exchangers. So in an ethanol plant, they essentially made powdered grain, we call it flour, and you add yeast and water, and you would ferment that mixture. And you'd extract alcohol, and the remaining material was used, which was called distiller's grain. It'd be fed to the cattle. So ethanol plants actually had 2 products. Most people don't know about the distiller's grain, but it's useful. But every ethanol plant in the country is usually located near a lot of cattle because they have a secondary byproduct that is very useful. So the logic is, if we do this for this old little ethanol plant, we'll duplicate it on other ethanol plants, and they're located near the supply of the cattle manure. We won't feed them distiller's grain anymore, but they can go and we can process the grain into high-grade food and keep those cattle happy. But the logic is, we're trying to adapt to the infrastructure we have already and push this project forward, change the world, make it greener.
Excellent.
If you want, we can march on through.
Sure. As long as, the Wi-Fi holds up.
Okay.
All
We're
right.
still going. Anyway, to give you the scale of this, nice big tanks.
All right.
And we have our ceilings about 45 to 50 feet high. We have owls that get in here and they enjoy it. And we have bats. We've had foxes and skunks, raccoons, all kinds of wildlife. Love a big old building. We have toads that come out of the drains, and a lot of wildlife. It's kind of fun to watch. We have an area that we call our little sort of Garden of Eden because it's in a large pond. It's about 300 feet by 300 feet pond area, but it hasn't been touched in 10 years. And the wildlife really likes it. It's got its own little grass meadows in there and large elm trees. And I said, we should actually, before we ever scrape this clean, we want to have some picnics and invite people in there. But interesting how an old plant can become a vital
ecosystem. Yeah.
vital to the nature. It also concentrates water.
Sure.
We actually collect the water off the roof and put
really?
it in tanks because our water is very hard.
Okay.
And for greenhouse operations, you need soft water.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to just collect the rainwater.
Sure.
And it turns out big roofs are useful.
Yeah. How frequently do you have to climb all the way up there?
We usually do it just for the fun of it.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Maybe once a year. We put American flags on top.
Sure.
But it's kind of fun. You're in the wind and it's suddenly a lot cooler.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's cold. It's warm down here. You get up there and it's a cool breeze. Anyway.
Well, I
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robert, and Robert, who's off in the scenes here. This has been super. I mean, I'm overwhelmed, but thank you for all of the amazing information. There we go. Quick appearance. Well, I just wanted to give a quick thank you to our partners at NMMEP and New Mexico State University. For any no-cost energy assessment needs, please contact Jalal Rastagari at NMSU and Jennifer Sinsaba at NMMEP. I wanted to share a quick breakdown of how the REBP program works. A lot of businesses have no idea how to work towards reducing energy and don't know where to start. A great start is logging on to our website, which I just posted below, and identify what you're interested in. Is that solar paneling? Is that saving water? Identify what type of business you are so that we can connect you with the right partners with someone like Robert. And then by utilizing our resources pages and referencing past interviews, you'll finally connect with me or John, and we'll do the work of connecting you to all of our partners throughout the state, help you gain some financial support, and do what we can on our end to help make you accomplish some of those goals. But I just wanted to thank you so much, and it's been an awesome trip out to Tucumcari. I think we're ready for lunch, all of us.
Yeah.
But thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a great day.